if God has placed someone in power, is it right for you to want to take over that position or at least share in their leadership? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Welcome to another week of Torah studies. This week we are in Numbers 16 through 18 and 1 Samuel 12. The cancer continues to spread in the camp of the Hebrews, and the people know their ultimate goal, or destination, I should say, of what's going to happen to them that wanted to go into the promised land, rejected God and his promise to go there, now are starting the wandering of the desert, and 40 years will pass, so a generation will be replaced, and then the children of these same people will be the ones that actually inherit the land. This chapter 16 starts off with now Korah, the son of Yitzhar, the son of Cat, the son of Levi, along with Datan and Abiram, the sons of Eliav and On, the son of Pelet, descendants of Reuben, took men and rebelled against Moses. Siding with them were 250 men of Israel, leaders of the community, key members of the council, men of reputation. They assembled themselves against Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You take too much on yourselves. After all, the entire community is holy, every one of them, and Adonai is among them. So why do you lift yourselves up above Adonai's assembly?" Jealousy had set in on Korah's heart, and he was now basically, in so many words, trying to usurp the throne, or at least share in the leadership at a higher level. And we're going to find here very shortly what that consequence of his choice is going to happen to him and those 250 men. Moses, when he heard this, he fell on his face. Verse 5 says, then he said to Korah and the whole group, "In the morning Adonai will show you who is his and who is the holy person he will allow to approach him. Yes, he will bring whomever he chooses near to himself. Do this. Take censers, Korah, you and your group. Put fire in them, put incense in them before Adonai tomorrow. The one whom Adonai chooses will be the one who is holy. It is you, you sons of Levi, who are taking too much on yourselves." So they're asking for more than God is willing to give to them. And Moses can't believe what he's really actually hearing. And I've mentioned a couple weeks ago that, in an instant, you can change your life by a decision that you make. And these people know they're going to die very soon. Or over time, and it's just a matter of time when they're going to pass away. And as mentioned, Caleb and Joshua are going to be the only two that remain who get to go to a lot of funerals, and at the same time, they're going through the growing pains. This is some excitement, because on the last book of Deuteronomy, or Leviticus, excuse me, it was just a series of rules and regulations and laws that people were to follow, and now we're getting into some action, so to speak, about what's taking place. And at the same time, though, they're just tired and they want change, right? They think Moses is the one that's brought him to this destruction, not God. So it's interesting how this would be a great psychological, if someone was into psychology, to just watch what happens in a group setting based on just the reactions of certain people and their thoughts, and how those thoughts manipulate a group of people, and then how that consequence comes from that. And we're not really going to go too deep there, but just to say that it's very interesting to watch what's happening for us. Verse 8 says, "Then Moses said to Korah, listen here, you sons of Levi. Is it for you a mere trifle that God of Israel has separated you from the community of Israel to bring you close to himself, so that you can do the work in the tabernacle of Adonai and stand before the community serving them? He has brought you close, and all your brothers, the sons of Levi, with you. Now you want the office of the priest too, Cohen, priest. That's why you and your group have gathered together against Adonai. After all, what is Aaron that you complain against him? So again, they wanted more power. They wanted to be the priest. They wanted to be even closer to God, so to speak. But it really wasn't about that. Their heart was strictly about obtaining more authority over the people. And it's very clear, because if it was something different, then Moses wouldn't be as harsh to them. But they were set apart in a very solid way. When I first read the Bible, I was thinking that the Levi kind of got the short end of the stick because they don't get property. But then the more I've learned, they actually got the better end of the deal because they were ambassadors to God in a very strong and powerful way. And even though it was done incorrectly in the book of Judges, these Levites became priests to people, even though that's not their position. So what Korach is complaining that he wants actually transpired over time. The people did what they chose, and they put the Levites in the priesthood besides Aaron's family. And so what I'm getting at is that it's just fascinating to see that the transformation even in my own heart to understand that the closeness to God is a better position than owning land and possessions. And so the chapter 16 continues in verse 12. Then Moses sent to summon Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, but they replied, "We won't come up. It is such a mere trifle bringing us up from the land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the desert. Now you arrogate to yourself the role of dictator over us. You haven't at all brought us to the land flowing with milk and honey. You haven't put us in possessions of fields and vineyards. Do you think that you can gouge out these men's eyes and blind them? We won't come up." So see how they've turned on Moses. They're blaming him for their choices. I mean, I can't begin to tell you the number of times that's happened, either to myself or seen it happen to other people, that they're mad, and even turning it to God. You know, you make mistake and then you blame God for the mistake because it didn't work out the way you wanted it to. And if you're asking God to, and you're trusting God, then it should work out the way He wants it to. And because it doesn't go that way, there's example after example after example in the Bible of people praying to God, but truly they're praying for what they want. God sees through that, and He doesn't answer their prayers, and so they end up doing what they want anyway, and it turns out to be disastrous. So it continues, Moses was very angry and said to Adonai, "Do not accept their grain offering. I haven't taken one donkey from them. I have done nothing wrong to any of them." Moses said to Korach, "You and your group here be there before Adonai tomorrow. You, they, Aaron, each will take a fire pan and put incense in it. Every one of you bring it before Adonai, his fire pan. 250 fire pans. You too and Aaron, each one will lift his fire pan." Each man took a fire pan, put fire in it, laid incense on it, stood at the entrance of the tent of meeting with Moses and Aaron. Korach assembled all the groups who were against them at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Then the glory of Adonai appeared to the whole assembly. Adonai said to Moses and Aaron, "Separate yourself from this assembly. I'm going to destroy them right now." They fell on their faces. "O God, God of the spirits of humankind, if one person sins, are you going to be angry with the entire assembly?" Adonai answers Moses, "Tell the assembly to move away from the homes of Korach, Dathan, and Abiram." Moses got up, went to Dathan and Abiram, and the leaders of Israel followed him. They said to the assembly, "Leave the tents of these wicked men. Don't touch anything that belongs to them, or you may be swept away in their sins." So they moved away from all around the area of Korach, that Dathan and Abiram lived. Then Dathan and Abiram came out and stood at the entrance of their tents with their wives, sons, and little ones. And Moses said, "Here is how you will know that Adonai has sent me to do the things that I haven't done them on my own ambition. If these men die a natural death like other people, only sharing the fate common to humanity, then Adonai has not sent me. But if Adonai does something new, if the ground opens up and swallows them with everything they own, and they go down alive to Sheol, then you will understand that these men had contempt for Adonai. The moment he finished speaking, the ground under them split apart, the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households. All the people who had sided with Korach and everything they owned, everything they owned went down alive to Sheol. The earth closed up over them, and their existence in the community ceased. All Israel around them fled at their shrieks and shouting, "The earth might swallow us up too." Then the fire came out of Adonai and destroyed the 250 men who had offered their incense. Very wild, right? God had not appointed them to the positions they wanted. They did it out of total jealousy. It's pretty obvious. They wanted more power. Moses recognized that. He couldn't believe that he was hearing it, but at the same time, he was frustrated with them. You can start to see that Moses is starting to have enough with these people. He knows their fate. At this point in time, he's still one of the people chosen to go to the promised land. But this anger that's building up inside of him is going to come out at some point. He has tolerated all of their rebellion and their misgivings. At the same time, he still put himself in front of the people to try to keep it from God destroying the entire community. And so God dealt with the people that were doing what they were. And in God's economy, cancer has to be cut out right away, meaning it's got to be completely removed. You can't leave part of it. If he says that something needs to go, and it's going to cost kings, it's going to cost leaders not following through what God had told them to do, not because they didn't start the process, but like in King Saul's case, he was told to take care of the Amalekites, and he kept all the good stuff back, even though that was part of the destruction. It cost him his kingship. And eventually David took over the throne. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, but all that to say is that these guys wanted more, and they weren't given more. They were given what they were given. And it's easy to, criticize. It's easy to point fingers. It's easy to say, I wouldn't have done that. But truthfully speaking, depending on when and how you were brought up, wanting more in terms of power and prestige might be your drive. I mean, I'm not here to tell you that's necessarily a wrong thing, but if it's done incorrectly and illegally, then it is completely wrong. But the amount of power that some people want, and at the expense that they're willing to take to get there, and the people they're willing to step over to get there, is misguided in my estimation. And so some would tell me no. They would say aggression is the way to go. I grew up in the 80s. Becoming CEO of a company was the plan, right? You're gonna train in every position, and by the time you get to that spot, you're ready to go. And somewhere along the way, I decided that I wanted to be content doing the best I can at the position I was in. You get married, you have kids, it kind of changes some of that perspective as well. Not for everybody, but for me it did. And then I still achieved the goals that I wanted to, maybe not in the time frame that I wanted to, and that not necessarily was a frustration. It just was a delayed opportunity, I guess I should say, to achieve that goal. Now, that doesn't mean that people that are CEOs or presidents of companies, etc., are bad people. For me, at some point, it was I didn't want that anymore. And, at times you think, gosh, I'd like to be, president and really change some of the things that are going on. But at the same time, I don't want that. I would rather support on the level that I can and educate myself as best I can to know right from wrong, so to speak, and whether the government is acting in our best interest or their own interest. And that's a good place to be, because then if they're against God, which is that's where you can stand against your leaders. If they're for God, then you want to support that situation. And you're responsible for the leadership that's in place. And if they're against God, as a nation, we are against God. And you might say, well, that's pretty harsh, but God treats it, whoever the leader is, that's how God looks at the entire nation. And if the leadership is not with God, he can separate himself from us, and what may appear to be blessings to some is absolutely downright curses to others. And so uh, in this situation, God was not about to let these people remain in the camp and continue to bring more and more people against Moses. It was unnecessary for one, but number two is he needed to end it right then and there. And there was no need to continue that process. And so basically chapter 12, or excuse me, 17, added, Moses instructed Eleazar to go get all of the censers that were used and hammer them out and put them on the Ark of the Covenant. And so that way we remind people when God places someone in charge, he's in charge. And so the Bible is very clear that God allows people to be in position of power, but sometimes it's for correction of a nation, to see the error of their ways. Sometimes it's to bless that nation because they've been honoring God. And so even in this short last few, 5 or 6 years, we've noticed the difference between a president that believes in God, trusts in God, and even through a disaster was able to still maintain pretty good blessings for our nation. And then the opposite is happening currently, and we're just getting destroyed from within. And so interestingly, that the nation would want something like that, and we're not going political here, but just the point is why in the world anyone would want to change from prosperity to government control makes no sense for me. But that's my opinion, and that we'll leave it there. Chapter 18 goes on to talk about Adonai said to Aaron, you and your sons and your family line will be responsible for anything that goes wrong in the sanctuary. You, your sons, will be responsible for anything wrong in your service as priest. But you are to bring your kinsmen, the tribe of Levi, along with yourselves to work together with you, help you, you and your sons with you, when you are there before the tent of meeting. They are to be at your disposal and perform all kinds of tasks related to the tent, only they are not to come near the holy furnishings of the altar, so neither they nor you will die. You couldn't just run in and see God whenever you felt like it. The good news is, because of Jesus and him dying on the cross and him taking sacrifice of his body for all the sin of the world and rising again in 3 days, Jesus was made it so that we could go in to see God. We were now able to, the veil was torn, as it is said, that now we can enter into the Holy of Holies. We can actually go in and speak to God directly. We don't need to go to a priest to go to God. We can go directly to God, which is amazing. If you think about it in just a simple scale, the God of the universe, who's created all things, allows us to approach him with our issues, our problems, and maybe not necessarily give us an immediate solution to that situation, but at the same time, he allows us to at least come to him when we want, whenever we want, and we don't have to go through the ritual service of going through Aaron or a priest to get to God, or bring a sacrifice, or any of those things. We can go directly to him. And so that's fantastic. That's great news for all of us believers. But God even listens to non-believers, because how would they become a believer? And so that doesn't mean that God lets people win the lottery. God doesn't give you a Cadillac. All that to say is that God is here to do, he's got a multiple events correlating at the same time. Could you imagine, your circumstance, you're praying for something specific, and God is coordinating all of those events, and I using English words now, in hopefulness that someone will respond to the call of what God is asking. But the good news for God is he's got millions and millions of people to choose from, and if one decides not to do it, then someone else will rise up to do it. And that's a pretty clear example of the book of Esther. That's what that talks about. If you choose not to, God's going to bring deliverance from someone else, and so, or from somewhere else. And so any rate, the final part of chapter 18 is just talking about Aaron's responsible for the holy things and the most holy things, and that he has his responsibilities, and he's to administer those responsibilities. And then the final part of the chapter is that he's talking about offerings again, free will offerings, and how they are to bring their offerings to God. And it's just a repeat of what we've heard before. But God likes to remind us, because we're human, we're also adults, and some younger adults will be reading the Bible, but he likes to keep repeating himself because oftentimes we forget the lesson in the first place, and so that's why each year the Bible starts again, and it keeps starting again, and it keeps starting again, and our idea is to remind ourselves of what our responsibilities are to God. But also there's blessings in that, and he likes to remind us of that as well. So, any rate, we're going to move to Samuel 12 to finish up for today. We'll start a little bit in chapter 11, and it says, Samuel said to the people, "Come, let's go to Gilgal to inaugurate the kingship there." So all the people went to Gilgal, and there in Gilgal, therefore, before Adonai, they made Saul king. They presented sacrifices and peace offerings before Adonai there. Then Saul and all the people of Israel celebrated with great joy. Samuel said to Israel. So here's the backdrop is that Samuel's been the leader of the group. He was the spiritual leader as well as the seer, or the person that they came to for foresight of what God was wanting of them. And I love how it kind of explains certain things here, but just so you are aware, the people demanded a king. Even through all of this, they still demanded a king. And so this is Samuel's kind of resume, so to speak, and the responses from the people. So it says, chapter 12, it says, Samuel said to Israel, "Here I have done everything you asked me to do. I made a king over you. There is a king walking ahead of you, but I am old and gray-head. There are my sons with you. I have walked at your head from when I was a boy until today. So here I am. Now is the time to witness against me before Adonai, before his anointed king. Does any of you think I have taken an ox or a donkey, defrauded or oppressed you, or accepted a bribe to deprive you of your justice? Tell me, and I will restore it." They answered, "You haven't defrauded or oppressed us. You have accepted nothing from anyone." And he said, "Adonai is witness against you, and he is anointed king and is witness against you today that found nothing in my hands." And they replied, "He is witness." So he's just basically going on record as saying, I didn't do anything against you. I did this all for your behalf and gained nothing in addition to just serving the Lord. And then Samuel said to the people, "It was Adonai who appointed Moses and Aaron." We just talked about that in terms of him reminding the people that that's what was happening. Corin actually found that out very strongly. "Who brought your ancestors up from the land of Egypt. Now hold still, because I'm going to enter into judgment with you before Adonai regarding the righteous acts of Adonai that he did for you and your ancestors. After Jacob had entered Egypt, your ancestors cried to Adonai, and Adonai sent Moses and Aaron, who brought your ancestors out of Egypt, had them live there in this place. But they forgot Adonai, their God, so he handed them over to Sisera, commander of the army of Hatzor, and to the Philistine and the king of Moab. And they fought against them. But they cried out to Adonai and said, 'We have sinned by abandoning Adonai, serving the Baal and Ashtoreth. But now, if you rescue us from the power of our enemies, we will serve you.' So Adonai sent Zerubbabel, Badan, Yiphthah, and Samuel, and rescued you from the power of your enemies on every side, and lived securely. When you saw that Nachash, the king of the people of Ammon, was about to attack you, you said, 'No, we want a king to rule over us,' when Adonai your God was your king. Now here's the king you have chosen, the one you've asked for. See, Adonai has put a king over you. If you will fear Adonai, serve him, obey what he says, and not rebel against Adonai's orders, if both you and the king ruling remain followers of Adonai, then the things will go well for you. But if you refuse to obey Adonai, says, and rebel against Adonai's orders, then Adonai will oppress both you and your leaders. So there it is. I just mentioned it just a few minutes ago, and here it is written for us to hear again. So if the king honors God, God will honor the people. If the king dishonors God and rebels, with the inference here is that the people will follow the leader, and oftentimes they do. So it's not making up something that, yeah, sure, there's going to be people that will stand firm and stay true to God, but the remnant, which that becomes, is smaller than the actual bodies. And so God holds the people accountable to the leader. And so therefore we have to be super careful who we want elected in office, because that's how God will hold us to that. Now, does that mean that God does place some of those people in power? I would say very much so. He allows for the corruption to take place. He allows for the mistreating of our voting system, whether it's here or across the globe. But he knows what's happening, so it's not like it's a surprise. And if he wanted the person removed, he could easily do it. He could open the earth just like he did for Korah and drop him out. However, as I stated before, oftentimes it's used for punishment of the people. Now, some people, I mean, that's not a fair statement, but it is a statement nonetheless. It's to say that, the people in Africa deserve to be oppressed. No, not at all. And there's plenty of people that go there that want to help. But the leadership in Africa who destroys these people, they have so corrupted the system, they need an outside force to help. And they at least allow missionaries and people to come take care of and help feed these people. But at the same time, it shouldn't happen. It shouldn't be happening. But this isn't about that. This is more specific about just a nation, and it could be our nation. It's the nation of Israel. God will continue to bless that nation provided that leadership follows God. And here's Samuel trying to point out that God had been their king. They had followed God to achieve all kinds of greatness. Even when they fell away, God was still loyal and merciful to them and was able to still bring them out of problems. However, they wanted a physical person on earth to be king because the other nations had it. And so there's a jealousy built within nations even at times. And so in this case, that's what's happening. So it continues, now therefore hold still and see the great deed which Adonai will perform before your very eyes. Now is wheat harvest time, isn't it? I'm going to call on Adonai to send thunder and rain. Then you will understand and see how wicked from Adonai's viewpoint is this thing you have done in asking for a king. Samuel called to Adonai, and Adonai sent thunder and rain that day. Then all the people became very much afraid of Adonai and Samuel. All the people said to Samuel, pray to Adonai your God for your servants so that we won't die, because to all our other sins we've been added to this evil as well, asking for a king over us. Samuel answered the people, don't be afraid. You have indeed done all this evil, yet now don't turn away from following Adonai, but serve Adonai with all your heart. Don't turn to the side, because then you will go after useless things that can neither help nor rescue you. They are so futile. For the sake of his great reputation, Adonai will not abandon his people, because it has pleased Adonai to make you a people for himself. As for me, far be it from me to sin against Adonai by ceasing to pray for you. Rather, I will continue instructing you in the good and right ways. Only fear Adonai, serve him faithfully with all your heart, for think what great things he has done for you. However, if you insist on doing wicked things, you will be swept away, both you and your king. So again, warnings to the people to follow God. Samuel showed that God was displeased with that choice of wanting a king, an earthly king. I mean, there is an explanation prior to this of what that's going to cost the people. That they're going to take their kids, they're going to take their land, they're going to take their crops and their cattle. That's what the king will demand, and the people still said no problem. And they even went on to talk about their hearts and that they're going to be about themselves. Basically, they'll be selfish people in a lot of ways, And if they choose to serve other gods, so goes the nation. And that's just people's nature. It just seems to happen often that as the nation goes, as the leadership goes, so goes the nation. And so, I'm not suggesting that every nation's run that way, but if God has been blessing that nation, and they turn around and decide that they want to do something different, God is not going to sit there and approve sin. There is no way He is possibly going to approve sin, and so that could cost the nation dearly. But that is up to the leadership in that nation. It's up to who we choose. In our country, we elect people. In other countries, it's a dictatorship, and they take over power and they kill each other to get that spot. And if just simply, if the government of other countries support that and do not do anything about it, then so goes what goes on after that. And so America has chosen at times to be the police force, so to speak, for the world, but it doesn't necessarily always end up in the best of circumstances. And so wars are fought all the time. It's all about possession and power, and it's all about wanting to rule the world from their perspective, no matter who they are. And so if you go back to every single war, it was concerning power. I mean, I can't think of one that wasn't. And in the case of when Israel starts going to war, it's to get back their rights and become a nation again. But they're going to do it from an earthly perspective as opposed to God letting them follow Him. Now, we're not going into the book of Kings, but it's very clear when the king followed God, they prospered and they were successful in war. But when the king didn't follow God, the people were oppressed and disaster came. It eventually cost the entire nation of Israel and eventually the entire nation of Judah, or all of them got deported to a different country. But in God's faithfulness, He still kept them alive. And in 1948, I've brought this up before, they became a nation once again. And slowly but surely, people are going back to Israel, back to their roots. So it's fascinating. This whole section, Samuel's a great read. It's a great example of a child basically being given over to God at an early age by a woman who was barren. And then God blessed that child, and the child had a very similar to Moses in the sense that he could talk to God like I'm talking right now, and they understood each other. God speaks through dreams, often through people or circumstance, and to know if it's God, you just can look and reference the Bible. If it's not from a biblical perspective, more than likely it's from your own internal perspective. But sometimes God will work in circumstance, and if you've been praying and it's a legitimate prayer, God will work it out for you if it's something God wants you to have or to go to get, we'll say. And there's nothing wrong with praying for rent. There's nothing wrong with praying for food. There's nothing wrong, because God promises in His Word. If you read the Lord's Prayer, He promises our daily bread. He promises to protect us. He promises to fight off evil. But we have to follow through as well. We can't just ask for those things and just be nonchalant and then hope that God's going to take care of all the circumstances. Again, I've said this before, it's not easy. It's easy to say it, but it's really another thing to live it, and that's sometimes very difficult. All right, well, thank you so very much, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.